Hi, I'm Mark Donovan from HomeAdditionPlus.com, and today I'm going to show you how to repair a large drywall hole. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut back around this drywall hole to approximately 1 foot high and back to about the studs, which are approximately 16 inches on center here. So the first thing I've done is I've put my hand in the hole, found out where the stud basically is lying, and drew a line approximately in line with the edge of that stud. And then I went up, in this case, 16 inches, and then approximately over 16 inches here. I'm going to cut this out with a drywall knife, or a carpenter's knife, to approximate the opening. Now what I've done here is I'm taking a square and put it over my line, and using a carpenter's knife, score the drywall on all 3 sides in this case. Then once I'm done scoring it, I just continue to work my carpenter's knife across the cut and all the way through the drywall. This takes a little bit of time. You got to go carefully, and by all means be careful you don't cut yourself. You may want to wear work gloves as well to prevent the risk of getting injured or cut by the knife. Now that we've cut out around the edges of the hole, we can simply just remove a piece of drywall. And we can now see that we're perfectly lined up on this stud for putting the replacement one, and over here we need to cut back a little bit further. You also notice in this particular case that this drywall is 5/8 inch thick, as we're working in a garage with a finished upstairs. If you're building a home or have a room that's either in the basement that's finished or in a garage, a lot of times you're going to be required by code to use 5/8 inch drywall. So now that we know this is 5/8, we're going to have to make sure we don't buy 5/8 inch drywall for filling in this hole. Now that we cut our initial opening, what we need to do is trim back a little bit more such that we reveal about half of the wall stud so that we can apply our new piece of drywall into this spot. So what I've done is I've taken my measuring tape, slid it back in here to measure the depth to the stud, which is 1 1/4, and I'm going to allow another 1/2 inch further to allow that stud to be exposed. So I got approximately 1 3/4 inch that I've drawn a line back from this existing line or cutout area, such that we can reveal that stud. Again, using a level here, we're going just to score the drywall along the line I've made. And then we'll continue to work this line such that we can remove this small section of drywall. I wanted to bring up a couple points. Number one, you'll notice here there's a plastic here. This is a vapor barrier. So when we cut the drywall away, we should really try to tape up with some duct tape of some sort, just to seal the cuts so that we continue to maintain a vapor barrier between the drywall and the insulation. Second of all, we could have used possibly a saw here, a drywall saw, but again, if you're concerned about electrical wires, which you should be, in addition, you have to also at some point use a carpenter's knife to cut back on the studs. In my situation, I felt it was preferred to use a drywall knife or a carpenter's knife versus using a drywall saw. It's your choice. I think if you go carefully and slowly enough with the carpenter's knife, you'll do a decent job, a more safer job, and will reduce the risk of potentially cutting any wires that could be sitting back behind the wall. So now what we're doing is we've measured the opening of the hole that we've cut, marked it out on a new piece of drywall, and I find the best thing to do is basically, again, take your carpenter's knife and score the whole length, in this case of this piece of drywall. It will make it easier to cut, to get a cleaner cut, if you just go the whole length. Then what you can do is after you've scored it, you simply rake along the back line, take your carpenter's knife, and cut the back side, and you've got a nice clean cut, as you can see here. Now we're going to do the same thing to go along this line, and we'll have our new piece of drywall to place into the area that we cut out. Okay, now that we've cut our piece of drywall, I put a small shim underneath just to lift it up a little bit, since there's a little bit of a gap with the rest of the sheetrock here. It should slide hopefully nicely in place. Which it does. And what we'll do here is maybe shim it up a little bit more, put some drywall nails in, or screws in this case, and then we'll be ready for the taping and mudding phase. So we've completed putting in the drywall screws. You could have used drywall nails and a hammer, if that's all you have. And at this point now we're ready to start installing or applying the mud and the tape to the area to wrap up the job. To mud and tape this repair job, we're going to need some all-purpose joint compound. Small bucket's all we need. We need a mud pan to put the mud into. We need either some paper tape or this fiberglass sticky tape. Works very good. I should say mesh tape. And then a couple knives, either like a 3-inch knife or a 6-inch taping knife, and then a larger 8-inch type taping knife to flare out the seams. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my 3-inch knife and just fill in the cracks around the seam. You can then layer tape over the center of the seam, taking a knife and just cutting, and just kind of pressing it firmly onto the seam. Then take a little drywall and just basically go over the tape to work it in. And we're going to do this throughout the whole crack. So now that we've worked the tape in, I'm going to quickly just use my wider knife, my broad knife, 6-inch broad knife, and just go around the seam area just to make sure that I've got enough material over the tape. And once we've completed this, we'll let this dry and come back in later and put a second coat on. Okay, so now that our drywall mud is dry, we're going to take our 6-inch blade and just knock off the high points, and then lightly, with a piece of drywall sand screen and a block of wood, just lightly sand down the area before we apply a second coat of mud. So for the second coat of mud, again, I'm using my 6-inch blade, and I'm really trying to fan out the seam, really spread it out, right down the center of it, starting at the bottom and working my way up, and then going across. Really trying to flare it out. So now I'm applying the skim coat, and again the key word is skim. You basically just want to take your flat taping knife and go the length of it. I'm using the 8-inch knife in this case. Nice fluid motion all the way across. Likewise on the bottom, and work your way up. And again, just a skim coat here. And that should do it. We'll let this dry. We'll lightly sand around those edges, and then we're ready for paint. So all that we have left to do here is just to take a rag and lightly wipe off any of the dust that's on the wall. And we're ready to put a coat of primer down. So we'll just apply the primer. As you can see here, it's blending in quite nicely. Never tell there was a crack here. So let's let this primer dry, and then we can get some finished paint, and this project is done. So that's it. We've completed this large drywall hole project. It took us most today to do this. Normally you would probably do it over a 2 or 3 day period. It requires maybe $20 worth of tools, and it's something that most homeowners can do. The only thing I'll warn you is it's a very dirty and dusty job, so if you're doing it inside, make sure you use a drop cloth and have a vacuum cleaner in between the sands. So that's it. If you have any other questions, visit us at HomeAdditionPlus.com.